First up is my case, which we're going to talk about the D.O.J. interim policy a little bit and 3 videos on IGG that I have recently watched that I found pretty interesting, some of the things that were being said. First, I want to talk about this YouTube channel that I found, which is ISHI News, which stands for International Symposium on Human Identification. And this, it's basically like a conference that they do annually surrounding forensics. It's really interesting. It's really cool. I never heard of it before. And they have a lot of the, trailblazers, leaders in forensic science coming there and doing presentations on whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
whatever their field of interest is, or innovations or technology that they are working on.
Yeah.
So the first video here has an expert by the name of John Collins. And here, I'm trying to get the name of the video real quick.
John Collins.
Yeah, John Collins. And the name of the video is Innocence After Guilt, Learned Lessons from Previous Post-Conviction DNA Cases.
So going back real quick, because I just thought of this, what's the point of them meeting at that conference? Is it just to expand, evolve, and promote growth in the sciences, or in the law supporting the science, or both?
I think probably both, but I think it's mostly tech and science.
Okay.
It's learning, so it's expanding your knowledge, networking,
criminal scientists getting together and doing and talking science stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That does sound awesome.
It is super cool. I watched a lot of their videos and I found them very, very interesting. But John Collins, his title in the video is Authoritative Leadership and Expertise Coach at Critical Victories. He talks about overturned convictions, and he really highlights the importance of integrity in the criminal justice system, that is like of the utmost importance to him.
Yeah,
of course, right? I know. He sees a major issue with punitive jurisdictions with the mentality of, lock them up, throw away the key. We're here to get a conviction,
AKA small town justice systems.
Exactly.
Literally, that's what he's talking about.
He said that these kind of jurisdictions are way more vulnerable to error. And he
saying it nice,
he has data backing this now. They've been doing research and collecting data on this, and that they're way more vulnerable to error because of their motivations of just trying to get a conviction. And their focus isn't on honesty, transparency, integrity of their investigations, but just getting a conviction.
Yeah, I've never met this guy, but I mean, just based off that statement alone, I think I just met my life partner.
So he said right now in America, we're going through the transition of a punishment-based system to an intervention system, which I thought was also really interesting. And why do you think that, sir? Because I don't see that, but I hope you're right.
An intervention system. And he means that positively or negatively?
Positively.
Okay. Because it not all intervention is positive. So is it
true.
Positive or negative
But again, his focus is on integrity and honesty. So that is a good thing if everyone's being honest and transparent and having integrity.
I mean, we're cleaning up a lot of cities. And like I've said a million times, the 70s, the statistic was over 50% of police departments had corruption.
I know, it's horrible.
Like, I think it was closer to 70%. I'm pretty sure the 70s was like 70%. So that is insane, scary, problematic, the opposite of what we want to see in our country.
I also want to dig into why I think IgG is going to be one of these sciences, one of these forensics that is moving towards an intervention-based system. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But he suggests anybody interested in this data on overturned convictions go to the National Registry of Exonerations, which is maintained by many universities and organizations such as the Innocence Project. He said it's the best place to reference for things like this. Amazing. Now, there's multiple experts in this video, but the next one I want to talk about just briefly is Tiffany Roy, who they title as a forensic expert. She talks about the decisions made when you're interpreting DNA profiles. Not just experts are doing this. It is prosecutors. It is investigators. It is, she feels like it's experts in this field that need to speak up and say things like, we don't know, right? And we don't know how this DNA got there. There's a large error when we're talking about how DNA transfers. Like, just because that DNA is there doesn't mean that it's the suspects. You know what I mean? And I thought that was really cool. But then I want to move on to another video by ISHI. And this is a man by the name of Steve Bush. He was in the FBI for 19 years and was directly involved with the forensic genealogy unit. He literally wrote the curriculum on how investigators are to use forensic genealogy. He wrote the curriculum. Whoa.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, maybe, because I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about it, but.
Well, he literally saw, while he was in the FBI working on this stuff, the Golden State Killer that case gets solved with forensic genealogy. And he said, that's the watershed case. He said, after that case, everybody was calling up the FBI like, how can I have a cold case. I have this case. How much does it cost? How long does it take? Help us, please. And everybody was so excited about this. And he said he thought everyone was going to be like ecstatic about this new science. He said, but even some people in law enforcement, and he said it was a very vocal minority that came out and were like, yeah, we feel like this is government overreach. We don't know if this should just be being used. Like,
I hear you.
Anyway, he's working on a tech company. He just recently resigned, or at least in the year that this video was filmed, which I actually think was a couple years ago. He had recently resigned from the FBI and was creating a tech company called Indago, which he hopes can work to solve some of the pain points that makes FGG, investigative genealogy, forensic genealogy, whatever you want to call it, have more automation. Okay, so like more so a software that can do most of the work for you, it seems like. He said, because there's many pain points where you are given so many matches that it takes so long, it takes months. And what they are seeing is exactly what we, the user, are seeing when we upload a sample to GEDmatch and we get our matches. That they said that's exactly what they're seeing. And he was trying to dispel myths in this video, saying the FBI can't actually see your genetic code. They can only see the bad guys or the suspects. And that they don't, like, when they get on there and they see all these matches, they see what we see. So they're not seeing anyone's actual genetic code. They're seeing the centimorgans. They're seeing the amount of the match.
Okay.
And he said a lot of people feel like they can hack the system, like they can get in there and see all the details of your DNA. And he's like,
I'm not worried about that.
He said, I'm not a biology major. I wouldn't even know what any of that stuff means. I can only see the percentages. And I only know what that means. And he said when he wrote this curriculum, it was right at the time COVID was really kicking up. So they couldn't have in-person training. They were doing it, which blows my mind. Think about this, you guys. After the Golden State Killer case, And then we have them actually trying to put forensic genealogy into practical use in the justice system. COVID ramps up, and all of these people who are now using this science were all taught via Zoom. And he's saying it was so hard to teach them. And he said they really took some hits on teaching it properly. None of these people were taught properly how to use this stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully by now they have been.
Yeah.
But how many people out there are using this? How many investigators and prosecutors are out here using this who were trained via Zoom and didn't get a good understanding of it? Because he said it was hard. Like they had a hard time teaching this over Zoom. Interesting, right?
It is interesting, and it makes me think like, okay, so you're already teaching experts, then why would it be such a hard time? Because I think that if I'm understanding it correctly,
he's not teaching genetic experts. He's teaching literal cops how to do this. He's teaching prosecutors how to do this. He's teaching FBI agents how to do this.
Oh, jeez.
And I ran across another video, you guys, and I didn't write this one down because I didn't think I was going to talk about it, but it was this girl saying she was a chief of police at one point, and she was had a bunch of time. She was retired, and she learned how to do investigative genealogy by looking at her own genealogy on GEDmatch, and was teaching a course saying, I want all police people to know how to do this. I take my training course and I'll show you how to. That means all they have to do, she's like, all you have to do is send it to the lab. That's only like $450. And then you don't have to have an expert read it. You can just do it yourself. And that cuts back the cost so much. And I'm like thinking, how many actual just regular cops are doing this? Because now, in a minute, we're going to go back to the interim policy. I don't know that that's the best idea.
Yeah, that's like, why when DNA evidence is submitted, I don't think it should ever, not even one time, be submitted without an expert to be held accountable to the science. Accountability rules all, okay? Well, so you better stamp your name on it, scientist that ran that or expert that ran that, so that you know you're putting your name on blast.
What's the point in even having experts anymore then? If just anybody could do forensic genealogy, there's no need for an expert.
Can't. That's the point.
Well, it goes back to what Tiffany Roy was saying, what we just talked about a minute ago, that interpretations of these DNA profiles are not just being done by experts. It's being done by prosecutors, investigators, and cops, FBI agents, not experts. And then they're using subjective forms of investigation
to back
data instead of, because data should be objective. I absolutely believe there's a place for subjectivity in law enforcement and like in investigations and guiding you where to take things, like those gut feelings, those from experience, type situations. Like psychology is subjective. You know what I mean? Things like that. It makes sense. Like profiling, a lot of that is subjective. But when it comes to things like this, like IgG or FGG or anything that is, it's purely science. It's either this or it's that kind of thing. I think it should be done by experts and it should be entirely objective.
Yeah. Well, just to I agree with what you're saying. 100% agree. There's just nothing in the world that's this or that. Just to say.
That's true. Anyway, he also said that he feels like that forensic genealogy is being mislabeled as a cold case technique. And he said that is not true. It is an identity resolution technique. And he gives multiple current examples of situations where they've used it. Like one instance, it was a mother and a daughter being threatened by a guy who was writing them letters and calling them. And he said they used forensic genealogy to find this guy and prevent him from hurting this mother and daughter. And that it's being, and he uses the example of
he did a crime. So I was almost thinking like, well, wait, they just pulled this DNA off a letter.
Well, he was threatening, harassing,
gotcha.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I got you.
Because I agree with you. There needs to be some kind of crime.
There needs to be rules on this, very tight rules. I don't think something should ever be allowed to be used as evidence if it's not backed by an expert. Because look, police are experts. They're experts in law enforcement. Like, that is their expertise and career. They are not experts in objective data science surrounding our DNA. I was going to try and say the long word, but I forgot what it was. Our DNA and matching it to another DNA profile.
I agree with you.
Flaws.
It is a flaw. And that leads us to Bicka Barlow, okay? I saw an interview with her, and this was on, it was on the State Bar of Wisconsin's YouTube channel. And this was an interview about a presentation she's going to be doing this January 19th at the State Bar of Wisconsin's annual Forensic Justice Institute.
Wait, like
this year?
In a couple weeks?
Yeah. In a couple weeks, she's going to be doing this presentation, and I really badly want to see it. I hope it's posted online.
Yeah,
but
I'm going.
So Bicka Barlow, if you don't know, she was in expert witness on the stand in the Kohberger case, and her declaration is what said that Kohberger's DNA sample was ambiguous and partial. We haven't seen that in any other court documentation anywhere. All we've seen is it's like a 5 octillion match or whatever the heck.
Even though she's the most expert of all experts that talk.
She is incredibly qualified on this. She is a lawyer. She has a master's in genetics on top of that. And she spent 25 years at the ACU's intersection of law and science. She has been working on all of this for a very long time. So she explains what genealogy is, genetic genealogy is in this interview. She says that she's trying to dispel misinformation by doing trainings, that genealogy does not identify a singular person. It identifies a lineage. She said that her presentation is going to be about the arising legal issues around the use of technology of forensic genealogy, and all of this being rushed into the legal system without much scrutiny. This is very new, you guys. The Golden State Killer in 2018 was the very first case solved with forensic genealogy. It's one of the biggest ones. And since then, it's kind of blown up, and we have nearly zero laws or litigations surrounding this. There is hardly any precedence, especially in active cases. The reason that it's mostly on cold cases is because of this guy, Steve Bush, that we talked about, that spent 19 years in the FBI. They were the trailblazers. He wrote the curriculum, and he said after the Golden State Killer case happened, they did 12 more cases that were all cold cases so they could collect data. How much DNA do we need? What's the quality of DNA we need? Potential legal matters that would arise in using this. And then they took all of that data they collected from those 12 cases after the Golden State Killer and presented it to the director of the FBI. And then that's when they got to write the curriculum on it. And then the interim policy came out, and that's all we got. And the Kohberger case is a very big deal because it's a very high profile case that is active, that is using IgG, which is it's hardly any that have used it, like barely any. In a capital murder case like this, I don't know if there's a single one, to be honest,
and I have
that has used forensic genealogy.
I have 2 questions for people that believe Kohberger could be innocent and or don't know. How would you feel if you got confirmation in some way that, the DNA was ran by an expert, that the DNA couldn't have had time to be moved from one spot to another, so the likelihood of it being placed on that sheath in that home, meaning like it had to be dropped at that house within a certain tight time frame, how would that make you feel about Kohberger? Now, all right, you thought about it? Now, flip the coin. people that think that he's guilty, okay, taking some of this into consideration, how would you feel about his potential guilt if you found out that this was not done by scientists and or experts? It was done by somebody that doesn't know anything about anything having to do with this. So the likelihood that it even is Kohberger's DNA or was Kohberger's DNA is minimal.
So
I think that could change everything in the case, literally.
The only important thing that I will say is that forensic genealogy is who's doing that is not the same person that's processing the evidence and the DNA. So whatever the profile is that's collected from that piece of evidence, that data is sent to the person doing the forensic genealogy, and all they ever see is the code on a computer program.
Yeah, I get that. That doesn't change anything. So going back to my question, you don't think that that would?
It would change a lot for me.
I think it would literally change anything. If you think he's guilty, I think the only reason this case is even in a courtroom right now is because of that DNA.
Yeah.
And clearly the rules, regulations, and laws around it are so wide and so free that all these experts have a major issue with it is a huge red flag. How are we to trust any of it if we aren't able to trust it when we own this justice system? Then why are we allowing it in there?
Yeah.
I think it would change everything. I think the entire case being picked up in court in Idaho is all because of the DNA.
I think so too. But I found it interesting, Bicka talking about how it's all being rushed to be used in the legal system, and there's very little scrutiny. There's very little oversight. That's a major problem. A major, major problem. And I'm glad that she's trying to address it. She's one of the best people to do it, in my opinion. She also talks about the discovery. This is interesting, okay? These are all the things that she mentioned that she wants to touch on. The discovery of information, the documentation of them doing the searches in these systems. Are they documenting it properly? Which with the FBI in the Kohberger case, it didn't seem so, right? There was only handwritten notes.
Here's my issue with that, though, before you move on to the next one, because that documenting, anything that's done in a computer has unrewritable history. Like, you're not going to be able to delete it. So it's there. It's, are you going to give us the access we need to be able to get it?
Right. And they should have some kind of policy where every search, you have to take notes. Every search you did, you have to write it down. Every person or whatever, I don't know how it all works.
Like a 25 question questionnaire of the potential suspect, who's doing the test, the time of the test, the length of the test, how the test, like all those regular all science search questions details, because you're doing science.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Agree. Yes, absolutely. So, also issues with the Fourth Amendment right, our Fourth Amendment rights, like privacy concerns, the privacy concerns of not only the defendant, but the families of the defendant, questions of whether GEDmatch or MyHeritage is being abused by law enforcement, and prosecutorial overreach or misconduct.
I think creating a system where it automatically notates every single person who logs into the system and every single thing that they do could fix a lot of that overreach issues. You know,
I agree with you. I hope in Doggo by the FBI officer or ex-agent, I hope he does that, but guarantee he won't. Because he's gung-ho about IGG, and I understand why. I get it. I understand it. It is incredible, and I absolutely support it. As long as there is true voluntary consent, informed consent on the part of the people who are putting their DNA in the system, and that it's not being misused where they're using people who didn't consent.
Yeah.
Because that's a major issue that Bicka and Leah Larkin and multiple people had brought up and said, we know that they're abusing it. We've seen it done. So anyway, the interim policy. I know I've seen another creator go over this, but I wanted to touch on just a couple things, and I will post it to our Discord on the investigations cases thing. I'll post it so that everybody can see it. But this interim policy is really the only thing that is like any kind of regulation on forensic genealogy. That's it. This. And I did hear that Bush guy, the FBI ex-agent, say that there have been a couple states that have passed a couple laws trying to limit what they can do with forensic genealogy. But that's really it.
Yeah, because nobody understands it. How can you manage something you don't understand?
Right. And it's not even, it even says in this interim policy that like basically no places have the ability, no jurisdictions, at least not the FBI, but like local jurisdictions don't really have the ability or the tech to do any of this IGG stuff. So they have to outsource to private companies, literally like every time, which explains Authorum completely. They don't even have the ability to do this at their state labs. It's not even possible yet. So the purpose of this interim policy is to promote the reasoned exercise of investigative, scientific, and prosecutorial discretion in cases that involve forensic, genetic, genealogy, DNA analysis, and searching. Collaboration between investigators, laboratory personnel, and prosecutors is important because the decision to pursue FGGS may affect privacy interests, the consumption of forensic samples, and law enforcement's ability to solve violent crimes. I don't want to read all of this, you guys, because it is boring. But I did want to highlight a couple possibly interesting points. And we can talk about them a little bit because I know we're running kind of short on time. But anyway, so that's not important. That's a definition. There's a specific one I want to talk about. So it does talk about a computer algorithm, which is interesting. It goes into like a lot of definitions here, which I think are important. And I suggest anyone who's interested in this definitely go read it. Okay, information derived from genetic associations is used by law enforcement only as an investigative lead. Traditional genealogy research and other investigative work is needed to determine the true nature of any genetic association. A suspect shall not be arrested based solely on a genetic association generated by a GG service. If a suspect is identified after a genetic association has occurred, STR DNA typing must be performed, and the suspect's STR DNA profile must be directly compared to the forensic profile previously uploaded to CODIS. This comparison is necessary to confirm that the forensic sample could have originated from the suspect.
Yep.
So that's exactly what essentially we saw here in the Kohberger case, is that they did IGG, apparently sent that to Authorum, and then compared it to the STR sample they supposedly took from the sheath. Our main question here is, if it was such a tiny amount of DNA, how did they get an STR profile and then also an SMP profile by sending that to Authorum with their little vacuum and then compare them back and forth?
Yeah.
How did that work?
What they're saying here too is like, after the arrest and you get the STR profile from somebody, you have to then take that profile and compare it to the original attempt that you submitted into CODIS, meaning they each should be timestamped and prove that this is the one that attempted to go into CODIS and this is the new one here. And yes, they are a match because of this marker, this marker, this marker, and this marker.
Exactly. Absolutely. So It talks about basically all the circumstances in which they can use FGGS, because it doesn't seem that they are supposed to just use it freely. Like, it's supposed to be under very specific circumstances. And here's one that Bush, that FBI agent, actually highlighted. And in this interim policy, it says that basically that when the circumstances surrounding the criminal acts present are substantial and ongoing threat to public safety or national security, then they can use this. Like, it doesn't have to just be in a cold case or capital murder case. It can also be when there's an ongoing threat.
Okay.
So that could be a qualifying factor in the Kohberger case. If they're considering him a serial killer who has moved across the nation, they could have used that right there in the interim policy. That could have gave them, because basically what Bush was saying is that clause, that sentence right there, gave them way more wiggle room to have the ability to use this in other situations other than a murder case.
They just have to prove someone might be dangerous.
Right. Exactly. So Kohberger is considered basically like a serial killer and an ongoing threat, and he's all the way across the country to the other coast.
Yeah.
He's dangerous. He's a threat. So that could mean what we were talking about before, that you don't have to have 0 leads.
Yeah.
That may not be the qualifying factor for FGGS in this case.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. It could totally be that. But there's, hold on, one more where it talks about the prosecutor. So after they consult with the designated laboratory official, the investigative agency shall contact the prosecutor. The investigative agency shall advise the prosecutor of the nature and status of the investigation, the results of the DLO's evaluation of the candidate forensic sample, and any reasonable scientific alternatives to the FGGS provided by the DLO. After discussing these issues and based on the information provided, the prosecutor and investigative agency must agree that the candidate forensic sample is suitable for FGG and that FGGS is a necessary and appropriate step at that stage of the investigation to develop investigative leads or to identify the unidentified human remains. If the agreement is reached on these points, FGGS may proceed. Meaning, Bill Thompson had to know everything if they followed the policy. But again, I don't think these are laws. And within multiple areas of this interim policy, they talk about that you have to follow the laws and regulations of the state that you're in, period.
Yeah.
So, like, this isn't an actual law. It's just a policy. Like, these are best practices.
Yeah, so
I don't think
they're pointless. That's what it means. That's literally what
I don't think it's pointless.
When you're talking to someone like me, and I know there are other people out there in the world like me, when someone says, hey, let me show you a list of best practices. They aren't rules. Like, you're not going to get in trouble if you follow them or don't. My first reaction is like, oh yeah, absolutely, appreciate it.
See, but here, my other thing is,
for real,
is that this is never to be used as evidence in a case, you guys. This is a lead only. This is to only be used as a lead, not evidence, ever. That it literally says that in this interim policy. So, who cares if you follow the rules? What's the point? If it's not a law, if it's only a policy and like these are your best practices and this is what you should be doing in this case, well, who cares if it's never going to be used in court and no one's ever going to know?
Yeah. Yeah.
We may never know what happened with the IGG in the Kohberger case unless the judge says, and we don't have a decision on that yet.
That's just unfair.
So hope they release that to the public. I hope he decides to, because I think it's important that we know exactly what they're doing, because that FBI agent said, I believe the public will support it as long as we're honest. We tell them the truth. We do it right. yeah, you're right. We will support it if you're honest and tell us the truth. The problem is we don't feel like you are.
Yep.
We don't feel like you are, especially not in the Kohberger case. So if all that information comes out and it appears like they followed this policy, because I do think this policy, it all makes sense. And if they're following it, I think it's right and it's okay. But the problem is it's not a law. It's just a policy.
Yeah.
It's just like best practices. And if it's never used in court, nobody ever sees it. Nobody ever gets in trouble.
Yep.
But that's what I got. I want to know what you guys think about the information we went over. I definitely am going to link all those videos I was talking about in the Discord under investigations and cases and the whole entirety of the interim policy. So come check it out. And yeah, if you have anything to add to this discussion, please leave it in the comments.
Yeah. All right.